Prophet Dwight Taylor here. Welcome to Kingdom Patterns for Business. Listen, before I get into what I want to share with you today, I have a question for you. Are you a person that is comfortable handling conflict, or are you the type of person that you'd like to, if possible, avoid conflict? The reason I asked that question is, of course, something happened earlier this week, and I thought it would be a good topic to talk about in business. How should you really handle conflict? Now, I know there are programs out there and there are ways that corporations prescribe handling conflict. HR, right? The human resources division of companies usually handle that type of thing. But I want to share something with you unique. Before we do that, do me a favor, head over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ Kingdom Patterns, youtube.com/@ Kingdom Patterns. Give us a like, smash the subscribe button, and hit that bell so that you know when we're online. We appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about handling conflict. Now, I spent 17 years in corporate America, and I think if I had to give an assessment of how people handle conflict, I would summarize it this way: people don't like conflict. And they definitely are apprehensive about encountering people who seem to embrace conflict. Okay. Now, I'm going to say that with a bit of history that I have and encourage you to sort of think about some of the interactions you've had in a professional environment. How do people deal with conflict? I think one of the ways I've seen people deal with it is they avoid it and hope it sort of resolves itself at some point. Another way I've seen, now I've really only seen this with leadership, but another way I've seen leaders handle conflict is what I'm going to call professional buffers. Um, think of a buffer as an individual between the two parties that are, having a conflict. That's another way that I've seen people handle conflict. But here at Kingdom Patterns for Business, obviously, we share business principles from the Bible. And there is a prescribed way that Jesus taught his disciples to handle conflict. So Jesus was teaching his disciples how Christians should handle conflict with one another. But I think there's some things I'd like to draw from these principles that can be applied in a professional setting. Now, the situation that happened earlier this week was a situation where I was dealing with a person who um, was spread too thin. All right. So this individual was spread way too thin. And I think you probably have encountered these individuals, right? They really like being involved in everything, but because they're involved in everything, they really don't have time to focus solely on one thing or two things because they're just spread too thin. And being spread too thin means that the individual may not have time to deliver the amount of excellence to an effort he or she may want because they're divided, right? Their time and their focus is sort of spread thin. All right. So anyway, because this individual was spread too thin, this individual caused a project delay, right? And that delay really got on the nerves of a different person. Now, this is how the person who was not happy handled it. The person handled it in a meeting with four different people in the meeting with an explosion, basically. Okay. All right. Now, without saying much more about that, I've seen that in my workplace. Maybe some of you have, where an individual just sort of lets it all hang out with others watching and listening. That's really not the ideal way to handle conflict. First off, if there's an explosion, there's an indication that something was building, pressure was building over time. And the only way for pressure to build over time is if the pressure is not addressed, right? You can think of a tea kettle. right? If you let it boil to a certain point, it's going to start screaming, right? Because pressure builds over time. Well, the individual that sort of lashed out in this meeting, not a bad person, right? The individual likes collaborating and working with people. They were just fed up with the individual who was spread too thin, not really being able to deliver a level of excellence that was expected. All right. So that's what sort of raised the conflict. Another thing that causes conflict in the workplace is just personality conflicts. All right. Now I'm going to share this with you from my own personal experience when I worked in corporate America. We went through a program called emotional intelligence. All right. In that program, you learn how to be number one, self aware. What character traits do you have that may aggravate other people, and being able to recognize when people are not comfortable with something that you're doing or something that you're saying. And then you also learn how to empathetically read your colleagues around you, right? This was the goal of the lesson. But in that lesson, I learned something that I never knew, which is there are two type of people in the world. Now, this is what was presented in the in the session. All right. So if you disagree, just hang with me for a second. There's two type of people. What's presented by this person who was presenting the topic. And what the person said is there are people who manage their lives by time, and then there are people who manage their lives by relationships. And these two people often in work settings clash with one another. Let me give an example. Watch this. And this is what the presenter said. And while she's saying this, I'm laughing to myself because I'm a person who manages my life by relationships. I don't manage it by time. All right. Okay. She said the person that manages their life by time is you can recognize these people when you're in a meeting with them because they are preparing their stuff to leave the meeting 5 minutes before the meeting ends. It's, this is what the presenter said. People who manage their life by time, you can spot them early without bringing attention to the fact that you're noticing. These are the people who are gathering their things and managing themselves so that they're ready to leave when the meeting is over. So they're gathering it 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes before the meeting is over. The people who manage their life by relationships, these are the people that are chatting with other people when the meeting ends and then they keep chatting. So watch this. Not only are they in the room that somebody else is trying to meet in, but they're making themselves late for their next meeting. Of course, assuming they have another meeting. But what's important to them is the person that is sitting across from them that they're engaging. What's not important to them, I'm not going to say it's not important. What's of a lesser importance to them is managing time, getting to the next meeting on time. That's of a lesser importance than engaging with another purpose. So these two type of people, the point that the presenter was making is that these two type of people oftentimes have conflict. And the purpose of the emotional intelligence was to understand what motivates other people, build empathy for that, and then figure out a way to avoid conflict, understanding who it is you're dealing with. All right. Okay. That sets the stage for what I really want to share with you this evening. All right. So let's take a look at a passage of scripture. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is Jesus teaching his disciples. All right. So let's read what it says. This is what it says. Jesus told his disciples, if a believer does something wrong, go confront him when the two of you are alone. Very key point. Don't miss that one. If a believer does something wrong, go and tell him about it, but only do it if the two of you are alone. If he listens to you, you have won back that believer. However, if he does not listen, take one or two others with you so that every occasion may be verified by 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, okay, let me finish reading and then we'll talk about applications of this in a corporate setting. All right. Okay. If he ignores these witnesses, tell it to the community of believers. You can think of a community of believers as a church. Remember, Jesus is teaching his disciples. All right. So this has a context. We're going to draw some things from it. Okay. All right. I'm not telling you to treat people in your corporate work setting as believers. That's definitely not what I'm telling you. So stick with me. All right. If he also ignores the community, then deal with him as you would a heathen. Now, in the context of this, a heathen means somebody who does not believe in Jesus Christ, the one who's teaching them this principle on handling conflict. Treat the person as they're not a believer. If the person is not a believer, you definitely do not expect them to behave like a believer. So applying this principle to somebody who didn't listen to you, didn't listen to the one or two additional people that you brought along after he would not listen to you individually, also did not listen to the body of authority, which is the church for believers. If this person didn't listen to all these three, didn't take opportunity in all these three occasions to listen, then that person is making clear to you they are not going to work to resolve a conflict with you. You're going to always have a conflict. Jesus didn't say treat the person bad. He didn't say bad mouth the person. He didn't say go run around and tell everybody that the person was unwilling to resolve conflict. He didn't say that. He just said deal with him as you would somebody who is a heathen, which means, or a tax collector. These are people that were hated in the environment that Jesus is teaching in. What he's saying is, okay, if the person doesn't want to handle conflict with you, just distance yourself from them. That's essentially what he's saying. He's not saying treat them bad and that sort of thing. That would be counterintuitive to who Jesus is, right? All right. Let's go back over and apply a few things and let's notice a few things, right? First off, Jesus is teaching his disciples how to engage believers. What that means in a corporate setting is that you want to pay attention to the type of person you're approaching. If somebody offends you, that's why Jesus taught this. If somebody does something you don't like, the prescription is go talk to them individually. Please notice it doesn't say tell all your friends about that individual first. Now, I do recognize in corporate environments, there are times when procedure, protocol dictates that you do exactly that. For example, if the person that said something offensive or did something offensive to you is your boss, right? Jesus is not saying go talk to your boss about it with you and the boss alone. That probably is not going to turn out well, right? In most corporate environments, what they tell you to do is either go to your boss's boss or go to HR to express that, someone you trust, right? That's how usually they prescribe handling that scenario. But let's say this scenario is just coworkers, right? It's not a boss thing, it's just coworkers. Now, Jesus's first prescription is go talk to them individually. The reason he's suggesting talking to a person individually is because if you try to handle it in a community environment, the likelihood that a person is defensive and abrasive and will feel like you are pushing them under the bus is very high if you do it in the presence of others, right? So there's wisdom when you're handling conflict if you know that the person is a person who you have normally would have had a good relationship with and something just happens, right? Like these two individuals I described earlier, right? They're colleagues. They've been working together for a very long time. They didn't handle it this way, but if they had handled it this way, I think they could have had a different outcome than an explosion in a meeting with bosses and other leaders and things of that nature, right? Because when a person explodes in a meeting, it may be true what they're saying, but that explosive behavior is not missed by people that are in the meeting as well, right? Because people usually don't explode in meetings, right? So if that happens, there's a double-sided coin there. I mean, the person may have effectively addressed an issue that was there, but the fact that they're doing it in the manner that they're doing it shed some light on them as well, or maybe even, I would say, cast a shadow. Okay. So, what Jesus is suggesting is, if you have a colleague, and what I'm suggesting, what I'm drawing from this, if you have a colleague, a business partner, a client that says something offensive, and you want a good relationship, a working relationship with that person, consider having a conversation with just you and that person. Now, post COVID, right? We're in a world where webinars and live meetings online are just commonplace. So you don't necessarily have to be in the proximity of the person. But I do think this is a call for a direct line of communication between you and the person that you feel did or said something inappropriate to you, right? The next thing is then taking witnesses. Now, right? There's a few sides to this in a corporate environment, but among colleagues, I think it's good. I think it's an idea worth considering, right? And that would be, if you have an individual conversation with the person and the person is unwilling to just listen to your side. It doesn't mean that they accept your side, but unwilling to listen. And let's just assume the person actually did do something offensive. Obviously, if they did it, most people probably don't think it is offensive, which is why they did it to begin with. But if you take other people, that gives the individual an opportunity to understand, okay, it's not just one person that sees what I did as offensive. There are multiple people, right? So there's an opportunity there. In all of this, I'm going to highly recommend that you, to the best of your ability, take a temperature gauge of the person that you're that you're talking to. Okay. Uh in most instances, right, those that we work with, we sort of know their temperament, we know their, that the way they handle themselves and the way that they process others disagreeing with them, right? You want to make sure that you're not um, sort of inviting an explosive response. Let's just put it that way. Okay. And you don't want to definitely create an unsafe environment. However, the reason I talked about this topic, knowing full well after spending 17 years in corporate America, that um, most corporations have HR policies around this specific topic, and they have prescriptions on how they um, expect employees to handle this. I witnessed a conflict earlier this week that didn't need to happen. And this particular company, neither one of these individuals was following any type of protocol. They just weren't. I don't know if the company had them or not, because I don't actually work for the company. They're my client, but um, they weren't following any type of protocol, none at all. I mean, they were firing off emails, and one person exploded in the meeting. The other person is dumping everything on me as as a consultant. I'm sort of listening because I'm trying to I'm trying to hold on to an assignment that I have, right? But neither one of them handled it gracefully. Let's just put it that way. This exchange that Jesus is teaching his disciples gives us an insight on how God handles conflict, right? If we do something that he doesn't like, he doesn't go talk to somebody else first. He tries his best to talk to us first. He tries to get the message to us first, right? And since he's prescribing this method to his disciples, it definitely is how he handles things, how God handles things. And so I think there's something we can learn from that. Conflict, I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, "Man, I hope I get into some conflict today," right? I don't think anybody anybody anticipates and looks forward to that. However, it is possible to have conflict or to encounter conflict and come out better, both sides, right? It is possible. And so that's what I really think Jesus is trying to communicate here. And in a professional corporate environment, the truth of the matter is, and I think most of us are aware of this, you don't have to really be best friends with everybody, but it's very helpful if you all have to work together to be collegiate, kind, respectful, and that sort of thing, right? And empathetic, right? So those attributes are attributes that I think are well in any environment, including corporate environments. Okay. So hopefully today's live stream was helpful. If you encounter conflict, is you don't always have to run from it, right? There's a way to handle it where both parties come out understanding one another. Once again, you have to understand who it is if you're in a conflict, understand the person on the other side of the table. Because sometimes, just as Jesus taught his disciples, it's not possible to reconcile. It's not possible to come to an understanding. It's not possible to resolve the conflict because an individual is unwilling to do so. And in those instances, well, at least you know who you're dealing with, right? So now you can be careful about entering into spaces where conflict can arise if you know that's the type of individual. Hopefully that helps. Do me a favor, head over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@sign kingdom patterns, youtube.com/@sign kingdom patterns. I'm Prophet Dwight Taylor. Until next time.